Hello, 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 hello. I'm gonna do the stream. I this morning when I came live, I wanted to discuss um Lucy Letby, and we got off on something else, and I really enjoyed the conversation that I had. But I want this nurse is really, really bad. So I'm gonna play this for you guys. And when you come in and rewatch the stream, just make sure that you hit the like button. So this is the case. It's not even a case. She was just arrested. Well, there is a case for her now. She was just arrested. And let me just make sure. Let me hide all of this and make this bigger. So we're full screen now. So this is the case of Lucy Letby. And this is the nurse that injured 33 kids and killed 7. So I'm going to go ahead and play this.
Of murdering 7 babies and attempting to murder 6 others while they were in her care at a hospital in Cheshire, making the 33-year-old the UK's worst child killer in modern times. In a statement, the families of her victims said that they were heartbroken and that justice could not reduce the extreme hurt, anger and distress which they have experienced. Lucy Letby was also acquitted of 2 counts of attempted murder, and the jury were undecided on 6 charges of attempted murder. Well, today the government...
So let me state that the doctors were the ones that were bringing all of this to light, okay? The doctors were bringing all of this to light. They were saying that, they didn't want to work with her. Things were happening when she was on duty. As I said earlier, she was injecting kids. She was injecting them with insulin. The woman is just batshit crazy. After they put her on duty, and they put her on desk duty, clerical duty. They found that there were no substantial evidence. They wanted the doctors to apologize to her, a written apology. And I said it was no case, and I'm so sorry, but she was. I wanted to show where she was arrested at, which is what I wanted to show as well. But she filed a grievance in 2016 with her employer at the hospital. And the mortality rate kept increasing when she was on duty. So the whole thing has made me sick to my stomach. So let me just finish playing this for you, but this is sad. Okay, let me go.
Has ordered an independent inquiry into the circumstances surrounding this shocking case. And North of England correspondent Judith Moritz is here with me. And Judith, you've been following this case throughout for months, and it's only now that the you can't even imagine for the families of those babies. Some of the jurors.
I'm sorry, guys. I had to step out for a minute.
But conspicuous by her absence was Lucy Letby, who refused to come up from the cells. She wasn't in court, and it's been fast-moving ever since. The prosecution are considering a retrial on the undecided verdicts here, and there's been the announcement, as you say, of a government inquiry.
She thought she'd get away with it, but this was the moment the game was up.
Hello, Lucy, is it?
Yes.
Hello, my name's Chester, please. Look, it's Stefan, 2 seconds.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Behind the door of this ordinary suburban house, Britain's most prolific baby killer was finally arrested 3 years after her murder spree began.
Just take a seat in there for me, Lucy. I'll move that seat forward a bit. Sure.
Yeah, I just had knee surgery.
Oh, right, okay.
She worked here on the neonatal unit at the Countess of Chester Hospital. Her role to care for the most premature and vulnerable infants. But that couldn't have been further from her
This
mind.
is so sad.
The crying, I've never heard anything like it since. It was screaming. It was screaming, and I was like, what's the matter with them?
Legally, we can't identify the families in this case, but their stories are distressing. These are the parents of twin boys born prematurely in 2015. Their mum was taking milk to them when she heard one of her sons crying loudly.
Now, this is the one that really, really got to me.
He had blood around his mouth. And Lucy was there, but faffing about, not doing anything. Lucy said, oh, don't worry, the registrar was coming, and she told me to go back to the ward.
The baby's mum left him in this intensive care area and went to call her husband. They thought their son was in safe hands with Nurse Letby, but a short time later they were told he was dangerously ill, and they rushed back to find doctors trying to save him.
We were taken in, and we were told to talk to him and held his hand. And then the conversation with the consultant, and she said, we're going to stop. It's not helping. We want him to die in your arms.
On the unit, there were typically up to 3 deaths a year. But in 2015, they had that number in the month of June alone. And the pattern continued, with babies dying or coming close to death. The common factor? Lucy Letby.
Yep.
This staffing sheet shows she was the only employee who was present every time there was a suspicious event. Dr. Stephen Breary led the team of 7 consultants on the unit who shared joint concerns about Letby. He's now speaking publicly about their experience for the first time.
It's something that nobody really wants to consider, that a member of staff might be harming the babies under your care.
Things came to a head when 2 out of 3 healthy triplets died within 24 hours of each other in June 2016. Afterwards, a meeting was held for staff.
Lucy Letby was there. She was sitting next to me. I spoke to her and said how tired and upset she must be after 2 days of this. And I hoped that she was going to have a restful weekend. And she turned to me and said, no, I'm back on shift tomorrow. The other staff were very traumatised by all of this. We were crumbling before your eyes almost, and she was quite happy and confident to come into work.
Yep, she was.
Lucy Letby was eventually moved to a clerical role. The doctors kept trying to get managers to investigate the suspicious deaths and her connection to them. But we can now reveal that even though consultants here repeatedly made loud warnings to senior management, they say they were ignored and ultimately told that if they didn't stop raising questions about the nurse, there'd be consequences. And the doctors say that even after Lucy Letby came off duty on the neonatal unit, executives tried to draw a line under the case. And it was only a year after she stopped working as a nurse that the police became involved.
A year.
After her arrest, officers found all sorts of items in her bedroom, baby's medical records, her diary, and notes covered in Letby's scrawl with phrases including, I am evil.
I killed them on purpose because I'm not good enough.
And using her words, she is evil.
You've spent time interviewing her and watching her in court as well, giving evidence. What do you make of her?
I think she's very emotionless. She doesn't respond to a typical human response that I would have expected.
Did you have any concerns that there was a rise in the mortality rate? Yes. Okay, so
there was no empathy or sympathy with what's gone on at all.
I mean, there are people who look at her and say, there's no way she can have done this. It's
Yeah, she did
circumstantial
it.
evidence.
Yes.
She looks as though butter wouldn't melt.
It's an example to us all, really, of not judging a book by its cover. We've got to accept, and understand the evidence in this case has been, I believe, significant and has taken us to understand that Lucy Letby is a killer.
As the trial ended today, Letby refused to come into the courtroom. Prosecutors later reflecting on the scale of her deceit.
In her hands, innocuous substances like air, milk, or medication like insulin would become lethal. She perverted her learning and weaponized her craft to inflict harm, grief, and death.
The nurse even wrote this sympathy card to the parents of one baby and searched for many of the other families on Facebook, checking up on them voyeuristically months and even years after attacking their children.
Yep.
I wanted to be locked up, but I never wanted to come out again. Because what she's done has changed the course of our life forever.
Lucy Letby had many faces. Party girl, graduate, bright young nurse. But each face was a mask for evil hiding in plain sight. And at last her cover has slipped. Lucy Letby will now be known as one of Britain's most notorious criminals.
Yep.
Judith Moritz, BBC News, Manchester.
Well, Lucy Letby has today been convicted of 7 murders, but the BBC has learned that there are actually 13 deaths on the news.
13 deaths, and she's tied to all of them.
Neonatal unit, where she worked in a 1-year period. That is 5 times the usual rate, and the nurse was on duty for all of them. As Judith was reporting there, doctors on the unit were raising concerns for months about Letby, but senior managers ignored their warnings and protected her. Our social affairs correspondent Michael Buchanan has this exclusive report.
This is the story of an NHS trust that didn't properly investigate why 13 babies died unexpectedly in a 1-year period. Instead, it turned against the very people who wanted the police to examine the deaths.
There is only one serial killer of babies that's worked in that organisation, and the executive team were not the people who were responsible for the deaths of those babies.
This is so sad.
They had some opportunities to get to the bottom of what was happening.
Susan Gilby joined the Countess of Chester NHS Trust as medical director a month after Lucy Letby was arrested. Within 2 months, she was made chief executive, a post she held until last December. Through documents and speaking to staff, she learned what the trust knew about the serial killer. The first 3 babies died in June 2015. The executive team held a meeting at which it was agreed that an external investigation into the deaths would be held. It never happened. By October, with 7 babies now dead, a staff analysis of the incidents made a link between all the deaths and Lucy Letby being on shift, but it was still seen as coincidental. In February 2016, with 10 babies now dead, the Director of Nursing, Alison Kelly, and Ian Harvey, the Medical Director, were asked for an urgent meeting to discuss the deaths and Lucy Letby's links to all of them. They didn't respond for 3 months.
The paediatricians were discussing, the terrible nights on call that they were having. One of them said, every time this is happening to me, that I'm being called in for these catastrophic events, which were unexpected and unexplained, Lucy Letby is there. And then somebody else said, yes, I found that. And then someone else had the same response.
And they made
and
these
they
doctors
all
apologize to her.
Realised
in writing
that the common factor for each of them was Letby's presence on the unit.
In June 2016, 2 babies died on consecutive days. 13 children had now died. Lucy Letby was on shift for all of them. The day after the second death, the nurse was due back in the unit. Paediatrician Steve Breary rang the duty manager asking for Letby to be replaced. The manager refused.
I challenged her. I said, well, are you saying that you're making this decision against the wishes of 7 consultant paediatricians? And she said yes. And I said, well, if you're making this decision, are you taking responsibility for anything that might happen tomorrow to any other of our babies? And she said yes.
Letby went to work and a baby unexpectedly collapsed.
We were urging them to investigate our concerns appropriately, and most of us felt the most appropriate way to do that would be to go to the police.
The response from the medical director was unsupportive. In an email to the paediatricians obtained by Panorama,
Look
Ian
at that.
Harvey wrote, "Action is being taken. All emails cease forthwith." The police
Yep.
were not called. Instead, in September 2016, the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health was asked to carry out a review of the neonatal unit. It urged the trust to investigate each death individually. This didn't happen.
Nope.
Around this time, Lucy Letby launched a grievance procedure against the paediatricians.
Yes, she
The
did.
internal process concluded that she'd been discriminated against and victimised by the doctors on the unit. With the paediatricians wanting a police investigation, in January 2017, an extraordinary board meeting was held. The medical director, Ian Harvey, gave a verbal report. He said external reviews had not highlighted any individual as being linked to the deaths, and that the trust was ready to draw a line under the issues. The chief executive, Tony Chambers, said he'd met Lucy Letby and her parents to apologise for what had happened. A statement written by Letby was read out, detailing how hard the past few months had been for her. The meeting decided Lucy Letby would return to the neonatal unit after the paediatricians had written a letter apologising to her. This is the letter they sent Lucy Letby, signed by all 7 paediatric consultants in the unit. Against their wishes, they apologised for any inappropriate comments that may have been made, going on to say, "We are very sorry for the stress and upset that you have experienced in the last year." Though the paediatricians feared being reported to the regulator, they kept going, pressurising executives to call the police, something the trust eventually did in May 2017.
The reputation of the organisation and protecting that reputation was a big factor in how people responded to the concerns raised.
They were dragged, kicking and screaming, the executive team, to call in the police.
That would certainly be the conclusion that I would reach.
At the time Letby was arrested in July 2018, she was still working at the trust. No disciplinary action had been taken against her.
The strong opinion was that there would be nothing found. There was a brief overlap of 3 or 4 days between myself and the outgoing medical director, and his parting words to me, to my surprise, were, "You need to refer the paediatricians to the GMC."
The former medical director denies threatening to report the doctors to the General Medical Council for misconduct. In a statement, Tony Chambers, the
I
former
need the
chief executive, said,
URLs. I don't need
"All
them,
my thoughts are with the
and I
children at the
can't
heart of this
do it
case and
from
their
my
families
phone.
and loved
I don't
ones.
know why.
As chief executive, my
So I need
focus
you
was on the
guys
safety of the
URLs
baby unit and the well-being
to
of
be able to
patients and
mod you
staff.
on this channel.
The trial has shown the complex nature of the issues raised. There are always lessons to be learned. The former medical director, Ian Harvey, said, "My thoughts are with the babies whose treatment has been the focus of the trial and their parents. As medical director, I was determined to keep the baby unit safe and support our staff. I wanted the reviews and investigations carried out so we could tell the parents what had happened to their child." Both men said they'd cooperate with the upcoming inquiry. Michael Buchanan, BBC News, Cheshire.
The
This
nurse
is so
Lucy
sad.
Letby
I'm
has been
serious.
found
This
guilty
whole
of
case
murdering.
just made me sick to my stomach. I just can't understand how you don't suspend this woman when all the evidence pointed to her. No one else but her. It's just, oh my God. Think of all these parents that went through this with her and the bullshit she did. So there was one more who took her down. So let me just play this one and I'm gonna share my screen. Just hold on a second. Talk TV. Let me play this one. I really needed you to see it for yourself because I was trying to write all of this down and just play clips, and I couldn't do that because it's too much. So let me just play this.
No single piece of evidence that showed directly that Letby was guilty. There was, though, instead, significant circumstantial evidence that pointed the finger at her. Dr. Dewey Evans is a retired consultant paediatrician. He was one of the 2 paediatric specialists brought in by the prosecution. Thank you very much for your time. Just your initial reaction to the sentencing. You know, you were an instrumental part of this case. Do you think that justice has been served? Just check we're okay with the camera. Can you hear me?
I need you guys to DM me your URLs for your YouTube channels so I can, Breezy, I think I might be able to mod you because you have a channel. I'm gonna do that right now while I'm live, but I need your URLs in order to mod you over here. I don't know why I can't do it from my phone.
Sorry about that. Somebody tried to call me on my phone.
Not
so
at
let's
all.
start again.
I'm imagining lots of people want to be in touch with you. Just, do you feel as though justice has been served?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. I think this is horrific. It's probably the single most appalling event affecting any hospital in the NHS over the past 75 years. It is beyond belief what happened to these babies. And it is beyond belief why she got away with it for such a long time. Everyone who had a duty of care to these babies failed the babies.
Send me your YouTube URL. So just go to your channel name up in the box, copy that and send that to me. And that way I can mod you guys. Susan, the same with you. I need you to send me your YouTube URL link so I can mod you guys on this channel because I can't mod you from my phone. It's not allowing me to. It's telling me to hide you and every damn thing else, and I don't want to hide anybody. So send me your YouTube URL link, and that way I can mod you.
And failed their families. I think my profession was a bit on the slow side to pick things up.
I see that now, Breezy.
But the responsibility most of all rests with NHS managers at Chester who failed to listen to the consultants despite their concerns after 3 months following the first event. Yeah.
Why do you think the profession was slow to pick it up?
They convicted her on 7. They might retry the other 2.
Your staff,
but 33 babies were injured.
They're harming their patients.
Thank you for that.
Therefore, that was the main problem. The other problem is that managers have taken over far too much control over the care of patients. And as a result of that, doctors are loath to raise concerns because they're used to being ignored or dismissed, or even being told, as in this case, told to apologize to the perpetrator of this horrendous crime, which is what happened prior to Chester Police and myself becoming involved in 2017.
We know you were giving evidence for the prosecution. Can you we've got plenty of time, so how did you first become involved in the case, and why did you decide to say, actually, yes, this is something I'm going to be able to have an impact on?
I've been involved with medical legal work for over 30 years, and I've dealt with a number of cases alleging clinical negligence, not deliberate harm, involving babies over this time throughout the whole of England and Ireland. So I was quite experienced, and since 2013, I've been involved with a couple of dozen cases for police authorities by the National Crime Agency. So my name was well known to them, and I thought this was a case that I was suited to. I had the clinical experience because I've been involved with care of babies from my mid-20s throughout my professional career. And in addition, I was familiar with the medical legal system. So I thought this was my kind of case.
So when you started looking at what evidence there was being presented, what kind of conclusions were you coming to, and how quickly did you come to them?
Right, I got involved in May 2017, and what I told Chester Police was that if they suspected anyone, I did not want to know about this. In other words, I wanted to investigate the cause of the collapse or the cause of the death of these babies I was not there to investigate the crime.
Okay, I need
And
harmony.
at that time, I was unaware of the name of Lucy Letby or anyone else.
Got it.
So I received a copy of the clinical notes of over 30 babies who'd either died or had collapsed during between January 2015 and July 2016. And I looked at all of them. Some of these cases, you could understand why the babies that died. They died from the usual problems of small babies, hemorrhage, infection, some congenital problem, for instance. But I identified 15 babies who I thought whose collapse or death I could not explain as a natural cause. And in addition to that, their collapse not only was unexpected, but I felt that it was due to a condition we call air embolus. It was as if someone had injected air into their circulation
2015, yes, ma'am, Gypsy. You
Other
heard it
babies collapsed as a result, in my opinion, of someone injecting loads and loads of milk or milk and air directly into the stomach. And if you give loads and loads of milk into the stomach of a small baby, it interferes with their breathing because the diaphragm can't move up and down and therefore they collapse. Other babies suffer direct trauma. They are found with blood around their mouth or blood at the back of the throat. So all of these babies' collapse could not be explained at all other than someone had caused harm to them. And then later in 2018, I found 2 more cases. These were the second of twins, 2 separate lots of twins, who had low blood glucose values. Now, low blood glucose or low blood sugar is common in small babies, but a very astute medical officer in Chester had measured these babies' insulin level. And the insulin level was very, very high, which could not be explained on the basis of their producing their own insulin. So in addition to the other items of trauma, we now had 2 babies who had insulin injected into their systems. So this was an additional concern and not something that anyone had suspected initially. In fact, I owe it to Chester Police for being obsessive and methodical in their investigation, because I only saw the insulin poisoning cases because they were the second of twins who'd been harmed in other ways. And so this was a complete shock to me and a complete surprise. But it was quite important, actually, because at last one could find some kind of smoking gun. In other words, one could now show that someone was causing harm to babies. Whereas with injection of air, unless someone sees you doing it, then you can't prove that anything, it would have been difficult to prove that these babies were placed in harm's way.
Yeah, it was your job, I guess, to explain what had happened to these babies, not by who, of course. That was then the job of the other parts of the prosecution.
Yeah, that's right. Sorry, yes. And I should add that what I did was I sent the reports to Chester Police and said, look, we've got these 15, and then it became 17 cases where I'm concerned about what's happened. And what I said was, you need to look at the duty roster for each of these events, because if you harm a small baby, that baby will deteriorate very quickly. It will deteriorate within seconds or minutes. So therefore, what you need to do is look at the duty rosters and find out which nurses and which doctors were on duty at that time. And it soon became apparent that there was, even after the first 4 babies, there was only 1 nurse who was on duty for all of the events, and that was Lucy Letby.
This is the person that helped them to catch her.
Later it emerged that she was on duty for all 17 occasions when one or other of these babies collapsed and or died.
I can't add a glass toucher.
We've talked already on this programme, and we'll continue to do so, about what processes were in place at the hospital, which meant maybe the alarm could have been raised far sooner. In terms of what you were looking at and investigating, Do you think that the methods that she used to abuse or kill these babies were sophisticated enough that it meant it was quite difficult to identify what it was that meant these children had died?
Oh, she was an extremely clever criminal.
That's because she has no subscribers.
She
That's
almost
why
got away with it, and they may well deny it, but for the consultants actually pressing and demanding that the police got involved, I think she could well have got away with this, because I'm sorry to say this, but it's no surprise to me, although it's shocking to everyone else. The default position of NHS managers when things go wrong is the cover-up, and I think they tried quite hard to cover up her criminal activities, and I'm glad that they failed to get away with that.
Well, obviously the hospital aren't here to defend themselves. There is a statement from the hospital which we can bring out. I just want to play you actually the statement from the police, which is suggesting that, because we know that there are going to be many other cases now examined by police to make sure that more didn't come to harm. Let's just have a quick listen.
She was very clinical and without remorse or empathy or thought process around what it was. And she continued to do exactly,
well, she's been found guilty. And guys, you missed the beginning where I played.
We would be foolish if we were to think
the things that she did, but this is the guy who helped catch her.
Gathered all cases that Lucy Letby could have touched in one go. We're committed to doing a overarching investigation, looking at every single baby's admission into neonatal unit for the entire footprint that Lucy Letby's been employed, which is over 4,000 babies across both the Liverpool Women's Hospital and the Countess of Chester. I'm not saying that there are collapses and deaths subject of the investigation, but there are babies that have died within the hospitals that we are within that period having reviewed. There are some cases that have been initially highlighted to us at the moment
7 babies
concerning from an independent
13
review.
others.
And
33 others.
Those parents have been informed about where we are with that investigation and are being supported.
Dewey, just listening to that, because of how sophisticated her methodology was, how hard is it going to be to actually, in any case that is even remotely suspicious, identify whether an investigation is going to be needed?
Well, the investigation is ongoing. I'm not involved with the subsequent investigation. I've drawn a line under my medical legal practice following this case. I've been involved with pediatrics for 50 years, so I think it's time to stop. Once you start thinking about what happened, then I don't think it's that difficult. I hope this does not sound blasé, but the first baby I saw who collapsed unexpectedly, and this is back in November 2017 when I filed my first report, I thought, oh my God, this baby has collapsed as a result of a circulation of air injected directly into the veins. And that was baby A in this trial, and his twin suffered the same fate, although the twin survived. And really, it's a matter of excluding the usual cause of collapse in babies, such as infection or hemorrhage or some kind of peculiar congenital problem. One could easily exclude those. But in addition to this, one also found in addition to this, the only explanation was the injection of air into the circulation. And then, having prepared my preliminary report on the first few babies, more evidence came of some peculiar discoloration that these babies had suffered, which has been associated with air embolus in other cases. And this reinforced my initial opinion and, of course, reinforced the diagnosis. The diagnosis of milk being injected into the stomach was far easier. Baby G was a baby who was on 45 ml of milk every 3 hours, which is not a large volume of milk. And when the nurse looking after this baby went for her break, Lucy Letby came in and must have given this poor baby a
I got
huge
grass
amount of
touches. She
milk,
needs to
all
type
milk and
something
air,
so I can see
down a
if she can
syringe.
wrench.
This led to the stomach blowing up, becoming enlarged. This interfered with
this mango
breathing,
again.
and the baby collapsed. And their baby vomited across the whole of the nursery. And as well as vomiting all over the nursery, the nurse still aspirated 45 mLs from the stomach. So you can't vomit all over a nursery when you've only been fed 45 mLs and there is still 45 mLs still left there. But it's clear that this baby had been injected with milk, all milk and air, and that was that occurred in other babies as well. And some babies suffered having milk or milk and air injected into the stomach, as well as being killed by an injection of air into the venous circulation.
Yeah. If you've just joined us, I appreciate we are talking about some extremely distressing details. The case of Lucy Letby, the nurse who's been found guilty of murdering 7 babies, attempting to murder 6 babies. Joining us on the programme is Dr. Dewey Evans, who was giving evidence for the prosecution, medical evidence. The final thing I want to ask you, Dewey, is just when you were looking at the information presented to you and in how you were compiling your reports, you're speaking with real conviction about what you believe was the cause of death in these babies. Was there moments where you thought, is this cast iron? Any moments of doubt for you?
This is in Britain. I don't know if she's going to get the death thing.
I couldn't think of another cause.
She hasn't been sentenced yet. She was found guilty.
That the police, because the police were involved, that some criminal activity was suspected, obviously, and I had to block that thought out, which is why I told the police not to name any suspect, even if they had a suspect. And so, to use the jargon, I approached it in a very clinical way. I only had access to the notes. The notes were electronic copies prepared by Chester NHS and given to the police. Many of the notes were organised disgracefully, not in date order. Things were upside down. I had to print out a lot of them simply to make sense out of them, so that both the police and I had to put up with, shabby support from NHS management. But each case, I looked at each case individually, and I think for certainly the 7 murder convictions and the convictions for attempted murder, each case, in my opinion, was a standalone case. In other words, if it was the only case, I think there was sufficient to explore and investigate it from a criminal point of view and possibly charge someone. Although if there were only 1 or 2 cases, of course, it would be more difficult to prove who was responsible for the assault.
Yeah, and the jury did convict her of murdering 7 babies and attempting to murder 6 others. Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Dewey
I'm going to show you this
consultant
one last
pediatrician
one, and then
advising,
I'm going to have
independent
to
medical witness for the prosecution. Really
get out of here. But this is, oh my God, I am so sorry. She was sentenced. I didn't, hold on. Hold on a second. She was convicted. She was convicted 2 days ago. So when I first looked at this, when they found her guilty, I didn't go back and check. And I'm so sorry. She was found guilty, and she has a life sentence. No death sentence, a life sentence. I didn't see this other one. And I went back to look, and I did not see that. And it wasn't in the news, but this one has it. So I guess I must just missed it. So hold on, let me hide all of this.
With the lives of newborn babies, today found guilty of 7 murders and the attempted murder of 6 more innocent children. You're watching a Sky News special, Baby
It
Killer,
was
How the
13
Police Caught
altogether.
Lucy Letby. In the next hour, details of a harrowing 10-month trial and the extensive police investigation to catch a murderer. We'll examine why anyone would harm children on this scale and look at the failings that left her free to kill for so long.
Once we realised we had great concerns about Lucy Letby and she was removed from the neonatal unit, why did it take 11 months for the police to then be called
Yep,
in?
11 months. Why?
We'll hear from the families of some of the
And I'm
victims
dropping a
on
link
their
in my
long
channel.
quest for
You
justice.
want to go watch all of it, and then I'm going to put
And I
it
speak
in
to the
my.
mother of a prematurely born baby who believes her child was targeted by Lucy Letby.
Her job was to care, to heal.
Devious, cold-blooded, calculated.
Lucy Letby attacked those she was meant to protect.
She used that normality and the trust that she gained to commit crimes of an unimaginable scale.
It's horrific to think of, because you wouldn't think that nobody would be capable of that.
Lucy Letby will be remembered as a killer with victims so small they could be carried in one hand.
Good evening from the Countess of Chester Hospital. This is where Lucy Letby worked as a nurse in the neonatal unit, trusted to keep newborn babies alive during their first hours and days in the world. Instead, she murdered 7 children and attempted to kill 6 more. Her crimes make her the most prolific child killer in modern British history. She refused to appear in court for the final verdicts and will be sentenced on Monday, when again she is expected to be absent. The government has already announced an independent inquiry into how she was able to continue working here, even after consultants warned hospital bosses that she was dangerous. Sky's North of England correspondent Caterina Vitozzi followed the trial at Manchester Crown Court and sent this report, which I should warn does contain distressing details.
Oh, Lucy, is it? Yeah. Hello, my name's Chester, please. Look, it's Stefan, 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Lucy Letby's crimes are difficult to comprehend. Her victims, babies, so tiny, so fragile, so many. But her arrest in 2018 led today to her conviction. And now
That's what I
this
was
shocking
looking for.
title as the
Thank you.
most prolific child killer of modern British history.
Lucy Letby was entrusted to protect some of the most vulnerable babies. Little did those working alongside her know that there was a murderer in their midst.
The doctors knew.
The jury at Manchester Crown Court deliberated for 22 days, agreeing that Letby killed 7 babies and attacked 6 others at the Countess of Chester Hospital. But in court and in police questioning, she always repeatedly denied she'd done anything wrong.
Did you have any concerns that there was a rise in the mortality rate?
Yes. I think we don't just notice as a team in general, the nursing staff, that this was a rise compared to previous years.
And she tries to look so innocent.
Used to be Nursery 1, also coined the hot room.
But we now know colleagues on this neonatal unit raised suspicions about Letby months before bosses moved her off the ward and well over a year before police were called in.
This case has had a profound impact on our patients and our local community, and also our staff, who come to work every day determined to provide safe and high quality care for all of our patients. Our
You didn't
staff
do
are
that.
devastated by what has happened, and we are committed
It was
to
going
ensuring
on for well
the
over
lessons
a
continue
year
to be learned.
before you called the police.
The government has asked for an independent inquiry into this, and Cheshire Police have confirmed they will look into the other years of Letby's career to see if she harmed other babies. Lucy
She's
Letby
on
decided not
33.
to leave the courthouse cells today
Killed
and appear
7.
in the dock to hear those
And attempted
verdicts
to
being
kill 6
announced.
more.
But many of the victims' families were here, the majority in tears, comforting each other. The mother of one child held a stuffed toy rabbit to her face as they learnt that a woman they thought would care for their children actually attacked and killed them.
This has been a long and emotional journey for all of the families involved in this case. I speak on behalf of the entire prosecution team when I say that all of their babies will forever be in our hearts.
Okay, all the babies are forever going to be in their hearts. The doctors told you that Lucy was the common denominator. It took you a year. You had these doctors to write her a letter of apology. You guys need to go to jail right along with her.
Lucy Letby's parents have also been in court, at times mouthing "I love you" to their daughter.
Really?
But families of the victims say for them this trial has been utter hell. These are the parents of child L and M, twin boys that Lucy Letby attacked, speaking to media for the very first time.
There's no doubt it's going to affect me for the rest of my life. There's no way you can get away from it. It's always going to be there in the back of your mind. It's been hell, to be honest.
Very, very horrendous. I want a life sentence.
But it's not going to do justice no matter what.
She got it.
She's taken lives. She's tried to take other babies' lives. So whatever sentence she gets, it's not going to be enough. It will be justice, but it won't be enough. Whatever the sentence comes.
But it is a sentence that Lucy Letby will not hear in person. Leaving the courthouse today in a prison van, she said she won't appear at Monday's sentencing. The woman who hid her crimes behind a smile and an NHS badge, now refusing to let victims' parents see her as justice is served.
Okay. This is disgusting.
The details are just so difficult to listen to, aren't they? And Katerina joins me now from Manchester Crown Court. Katerina, we know that these verdicts have actually been delivered over a number of days. A reporting restriction has been lifted, and we're now able to explain more clearly what happened. What was the reaction from the public gallery on those days that the verdicts came, and indeed the reaction from Letby herself?
Extremely emotional, to sum it up in just a couple of words, Jonathan, seeing the families of those babies in the public gallery, both during the course of this trial and as they heard those verdicts read out. There were many in tears. These were families who didn't know each other before and during the time that their babies were on the neonatal ward at the Countess of Chester Hospital. But over the course of this 9-month trial and month of jury deliberation, they have become a comfort to each other. And as they heard those guilty verdicts being read out and many burst into tears, we saw parents consoling each other. We saw one mother holding a stuffed toy, a small rabbit, close to her face, burrowing her face into it and crying into it as she heard that Lucy Letby had been found guilty of murdering her child. Also in the public gallery were the parents of Lucy Letby, as you saw in my report there. As you say, these verdicts have been delivered in several sets over the course of a few days. Lucy Letby was present for the first 2 times that verdicts were delivered. In one of them, the initial one where she was found guilty of 2 counts of attempted murder, she burst into tears. The second time, where she was found guilty of counts of murder, her mother in particular cried openly in the courtroom and could be heard saying, "This can't be right, this can't be serious." However, from that point onwards, Lucy Letby chose not to leave her cells in the court building and not to be in the dock to hear further guilty verdicts and further verdicts being read out. And we understand from her defence team, as you heard in my report, that she won't be in the court for sentencing on Monday either. Very distressing for the parents, of course, to hear that. They want to see justice served. The parents we've spoken to say it is so important now for them to see Lucy Letby be given the ultimate penalty. And also, of course, for those parents now, so many questions about what could have been done differently. We know
from this trial, from speaking to colleagues of Lucy Letby, that there were suspicions raised about her on the ward by colleagues to hospital bosses months before she was moved off the ward. Those are questions the families now want answers to. And today we've also been speaking to one of those consultants who raised suspicion, John Gibbs, a consultant on the neonatal ward, who raised suspicions in 2015 to hospital bosses. Speaking to Sky News earlier today, this is what he said.
Once we realised we had great concerns about Lucy Letby and she was removed from the neonatal unit, why did it take 11 months for the police to then be called in? But that's something that we paediatricians have to look at for why we didn't stop her earlier. But also the managers need to answer for why it took so long for the police to come in.
So I dropped the link in the chat. There is so many different news things on her, and I have all my little sticky papers. I was writing all this stuff down, and I decided just to play you the reels that I was looking at and watching. I have a lunch date with my granddaughter at 1:30, so I have to get out of here. But this is really... Since 2015, Harmony, 2015, the doctors went and they had the chart. Every time a child died, she was on duty. Since 2015, this has been going on. 2015. Let me let the doctor finish talking.
Something like this, hopefully not on the same scale, ever was to happen again, we need to learn lessons for how long it took in this particular case to see could it be done better in the future.
I was supposed to be going on base, but they changed my
And I think over the days, weeks, and indeed months to come, we will hear more about those questions. There will be questions for the hospital to answer. We know now that the government wants to launch an independent inquiry to what happened here. But I think it is today, now, in this moment, outside this courtroom,
this is
a
not
chance
like
to
the
reflect on the
US.
families
No cameras.
of those victims.
I bet they
those
have them now.
families who have so bravely sat and listened to such distressing detail, the harrowing moments of how their children died or how their children were attacked. Families that the police say have...
The worst part is this is the neonatal unit. These are when kids are struggling for their life. This was the neonatal unit.
Sat here with dignity and faced and heard those details, whilst Lucy Letby today decided she didn't.
Yeah, Katerina, families who've had this hanging over them for so many years. Thank you very much, Katerina Vitozzi there outside court in Manchester. Well, police are continuing to investigate other suspicious incidents during Lucy Letby's 4 years here at the Countess Hospital. In total, they'll be reviewing the care of up to 4,000 babies. But what about the investigation to catch her in the first place? Our correspondent, Tom Parminter, has been working with our data and forensics team to analyse how one of the UK's worst child killers was caught.
It's the case nobody wanted to believe could be true. But for the police, convicting Lucy Letby was the culmination of a painstaking and distressing investigation.
The key aspect of this investigation has been always asking ourselves, who else could it be if not her, and what else could it be?
Lucy Letby started working at the Countess of Chester Hospital in January 2012, just before her 22nd birthday. She joined as a nurse in the neonatal unit. But from January 2015, the mortality rate at the unit began to rise above what might be considered normal rates. On June the 8th, a baby boy, child A, died. He and his twin sister were being cared for in Nursery 1, the room for the most poorly patients. At 8 o'clock, Lucy Letby was half an hour into her night shift. She was the designated nurse for the baby boy that night. 26 minutes later, Letby called a doctor over to child A's incubator. He was deteriorating rapidly. Staff began resuscitation, and an on-call consultant responded to the emergency. The baby died just before 9 o'clock, less than 90 minutes into Letby's shift. Air had been injected into his bloodstream.
It was unexpected. and unexplained are two words they don't deal with in neonatal medicine. If a child collapses, it's usually explainable, and it's usually always expected.
Then on the 5th of August, another baby, child F, was in nursery 2. Letby was looking after another infant in the same room, but at 1:54 in the morning, child F suffered an unexpected drop in his blood sugar and a surge in his heart rate. The baby survived, and a blood test revealed he'd been given insulin that he didn't need. There was no reason why. No baby on the unit was being prescribed it. It was kept in a locked fridge next to the nurse's station. That summer of 2015 was when colleagues became suspicious. They were told it was very unlikely there was anything going on and were urged not to make a fuss. Dr. Ravi Jairam was one of those doctors who spoke out. He said he'd become extremely uncomfortable with Lucy Letby working on the unit. And this pattern continued as there were more babies who lost their lives or suffered unexpected collapses. On the 23rd of June 2016, Letby was looking after child O, a triplet. The baby boy became unwell. Another nurse suggested the child be moved back to nursery 1, where the most poorly babies are cared for. But Letby disagreed, and the baby collapsed. He recovered, but suffered 2 further collapses, and at 5:47, the baby was pronounced dead. Consultant Dr. Breary believed the baby should have responded better to resuscitation. Child O was found to have an injury to his liver and air injected into his bloodstream. The following day, child O's brother, child P, another of the triplets, died under Lucy Letby's care. It prompted Dr. Breary to say that he wasn't happy with Lucy Letby working on the unit, but he was told there was no evidence against her and that she would continue nursing. But Letby's suspicious colleagues were right. She'd been attacking babies here for the past 12 months. Over the next few months, the hospital carried out a review as to what was happening inside the neonatal unit. Lucy Letby was then moved to an administrative role. In November 2016, an external report found no definitive explanation for the high number of deaths. But in May the following year, the hospital called in the police.
The initial focus was around the hypotheses of, what could have occurred. So a generic hypothesis of it could be natural occurring deaths, it could be natural occurring collapses, it could be an organic reason, it could be a virus. And then one of the hypotheses was that it could be inflicted harm.
The more experts they talked to, the more evidence they gathered, the more the case started to take shape. Then, on the 3rd of July 2018, Lucy Letby was arrested.
What was clear at that point was that Lucy Letby was the consistent in all this. She was the thread running through them all.
Yeah.
And therefore, in evidential terms, the biggest source of evidence.
Searches of her home in Chester and her parents' house in Hereford uncovered patient records and handwritten notes that gave clues about her state of mind. Among the scrawled notes were the words, "I am evil. I did this." In her bedroom, stuffed into these shopping bags, were hospital handover sheets. In total, 257 were found. Many included details of the babies Letby had allegedly harmed. Her social media showed searches for 11 of the families affected.
Hi, gang.
Police also discovered that she sent one of her alleged victims' parents a sympathy card on the day of the baby's funeral. She kept an image of the card on her phone. Crucially, the police also analysed her shift patterns. Look at the line of crosses. They showed that Letby was the only member of staff on shift when all the incidents took place. On the 11th of November 2020, over 2 years after she was arrested, Lucy Letby was charged with murder and attempted murder.
That realization of, you know, my God, somebody has taken the life of these babies and somebody has been responsible for these life-changing injuries to these babies, and nobody could say anything. And everybody looked at each other and there was not a word spoken.
Letby always denied harming the babies in her care, but the evidence told a different, more harrowing story.
Well, as we've been seeing the scale of this investigation.
So, guys, that really pisses me off too. This woman is disgusting. She is seriously, and I don't think she's ill. She's just fucking evil. Hold on. She's just fucking evil. What is this? Okay, hold on. I don't want to see all of that.
Has no real feelings for others. Someone who is born with psychopathic tendencies and who has focused on this idea of controlling and harming children as being something that gives them satisfaction or pleasure in some bizarre way. It may have taken a lifetime to arrive at that kind of conclusion that that is what she wants to do. Because someone with psychopathic tendencies does not get the kind of sensitive enjoyment from life that most of us do. So they kind of
look at her eyes, though,
and it often ends up being
she's not even crying. Well, at least they weren't red.
Harming others.
We know that she'd been a student here at the hospital before getting a full-time job, and it was some years before she started to carry out her attacks, as far as we know. What changes in someone's mind to be seemingly a hard-working, dedicated professional and then switching to being a killer?
In the cases of these Munchausen individuals, there is no real switching. The propensity is always there. It's stumbling across a situation where there are infinite possibilities. In other words, you're in a chaotic situation, you're in control of a small patient. The patient cannot speak up for themselves and say, oh, the nurse did that to me yesterday. Therefore, you're in an ideal situation to fall into the role of someone who will take control of that individual, kill that individual, and then stare at the parents morbidly, satisfying themselves on the reaction.
What did you make of the methods that she used to kill? Because she changed the method, didn't she? She didn't stick to just one way of killing these babies. What can we read into that? Was that all part of her being able to tracks, trying to divert attention?
I think so.
The method she chose, basically, I think, reflect the idea that she pre-thought a lot of it. She actually did realize that if you use the same method, say if you use insulin all the time, this would begin to register with the professionals around you and the people that are watching the outcomes. So she varied it with air, milk even, and these were always carefully chosen as things that would dissipate and not be easily detected afterwards.
All right, we must leave it there, but we do appreciate your time and analysis, Dr. David Holmes. Thank you very much. You're what?
Yeah. So, guys, I dropped the link in the chat. There are so many different videos out there on her. They're speaking with her colleagues. They really didn't have friends, but there's a lot of videos out there. She was always said to be polite and easy to get along with. And she's the one that filed the grievance with the hospital because the doctors were refusing to work with her and they were accusing her of killing these babies. And like I said, for those that weren't in here before, the hospital made the doctors write her a letter of apology. It was 7 doctors that were accusing her, that knew that there was something wrong, and they had the doctors to write her a letter of apology. So I wanted you to, it was just so much. I couldn't keep up with writing everything down, and I couldn't put all of this on a PowerPoint. It was just really, really bad. But I will be doing the Microsoft case. I covered it a little bit. Now the wife has been indicted. So I definitely will be covering her, and I'm going to do a timeline for that one as well. But this one, it was just so much. And I just needed you guys to see it for yourselves. So I want to say thank you all for joining me. And I will be back later on this evening with Debbie. Oh my God, 3 lives in one day. But right now, I told Kayla I was going to be ready to go by 1:30. I told her, give me 10 minutes. We're having lunch today. She went for her orientation and everything. So I'm going to go have lunch with my granddaughter. I don't get to spend that much time with her, except for, you know, on the weekends, we'll go do some things. But I'm going to spend time with her today. So thank you guys for being here. I really, really, really appreciate it. And we will be covering more of these. But the Microsoft case, I'm just going to do it as a timeline. And that way we can break it all down. And that's what I'm going to do for that one. But please go check out all the videos. There's so many of them. Her name is Lucy Letby, and she's a serial murderer. That is what she is. So thank you guys for being here. I'm going to have some lunch. Have a great day. Bye. Bye, guys.